Yeah, so I want us to discuss about homeostasis. What's homeostasis? I'm sure that you have not the first time. What's homeostasis?
Yeah, morning class. Homeostasis, the maintenance of internal environment, metabolic reactions in the body.
Of the internal environment. Yeah, so the body's ability to maintain a stable internal environment. Um, we know, but it's very essential the body gets to maintain the various parameters in the body within a stable environment so as to enable the body to function normally and also for the body's survival. We have things like the temperature that needs to be regulated. We have blood glucose levels which needs to be regulated. We have the fluids and the electrolytes which needs to be regulated. We have um, pH which needs to be balanced. Remember that if there's an imbalance in the pH, we'll be talking about acidosis or alkalosis. Talk about the fluids. If they're not regulated, then we're talking about now the hydration state of the patient will be affected, the renal system will be affected, and such. So it's very important that the body gets to maintain a stable internal environment. So homeostasis is very important. Of course, it functions just to make sure that now the different factors, the different parameters are within the normal branches. We have the key components of homeostasis. We have three major components. We have the sensors, which we also refer to as the receptors. We have the control center, and then we have the effectors. The sensors or the receptors, they have a key responsibility of detecting if there are any changes in the internal environment. Like we have the thermoreceptors, which detect changes in temperature. Then we have the control center, which is usually in the brain, more especially the hypothalamus, like what we have been shown there. So the control center usually now processes the information that has come in from the sensors or the receptors. So it processes the information and then it's able to determine the response that it needs to give. Then we have the effectors. Effectors now are those systems or those organs that now will be responsible for carrying out that response from now the control center. We have like things like the kidneys, the lungs, the sweating glands, all that now will be responsible for making sure that information that has been processed is now sent to the relevant organs. So so that's how basically how homeostasis really works. So of course, factors that affect homeostasis like the genetics, the physical conditions, the diet and nutrition of the individual, medication side effects, presence of toxins, all those can lead to homeostatic imbalances. And with the homeostatic imbalances, if there's an imbalance, then one is prone to disease or death in that case. So now we have feedback systems that now regulate homeostasis. So the feedback systems now, we can find that those loops that now respond to the various changes, and they help now to return the body to its normal state. So we have two feedback systems. We have the negative feedback system and the positive feedback system. The negative feedback system is actually the most common, and most of our body parts actually work using the negative feedback system. So with the negative feedback system, it reverses the change to bring now the system back to normal. So what it does is that it stabilizes, it brings about stability to the body by negating the original stimulus. So if the stimulus was adding something, it just negates it, brings it back just to stabilize that. Examples of the negative feedback system, we have like temperature regulation, where if the body gets too hot, the cooling mechanisms like sweating will cool down the body. Remember when the body is hot, usually we sweat. That sweating is a negative feedback system because now it is a cooling system that is trying to bring back the body to a normal temperature. Uh, Things like blood glucose regulation. Remember that after eating, our blood sugar will always rise. And once blood sugar rises, pancreas will release insulin. Uh, with the release of insulin, now glucose will move into cells, and thus the blood sugar levels will lower. So that's a negative feedback system. And you see now, if blood sugar drops, now the pancreas again now will release glucagon. The liver releases the stored glucose, and the blood sugar rises. That is, the blood sugar levels are below the normal. So that's a negative feedback system. So if the blood sugar rises, insulin will be released, and that will make blood glucose to move into the cells, and the blood glucose sugar levels will go down. If the blood sugar levels are low, then glucagon is released, then which will now allow the liver to release the stored glucose, and blood sugar levels will rise. So still that is a negative feedback system. Then we have the positive feedback system. The positive feedback system, it amplifies the original change. So what it does, it enhances or it moves in the direction, in some cases it accelerates the direction of that stimulus. So uh, so what it does, it moves the body away from now the normal state, accelerates the body from that normal state, it achieves a specific outcome, then it drops back to the normal function. Usually, we have two cardinal examples we use in positive feedback system. One of them is during childbirth, during labor. You see now, once the baby starts to push against the suffix, the brain will be triggered. So that means that now the receptors will receive that the sensors will, the childbirth about to take place, will send that to the brain. The brain now will stimulate the release of oxytocin, and oxytocin now will strengthen the contractions. And with strengthening of the contractions, there will be more pushing. With more pushing, more oxytocin is released until childbirth. And immediately after childbirth, the oxytocin production again ceases to be because it has achieved its intended outcome. The intended outcome here was the successful childbirth. So the brain was being stimulated to stimulate the release of oxytocin to enhance the contractions so that childbirth can take place. But the oxytocin production now ceases to be or reduces. That's one of the cardinal signs of positive feedback system where it enhances. Then the other one is blood clothing. Um, with blood clothing, of course, there is when one is exposed to an injury. Of course, I know we'll be talking about that. Platelets will be activated. They will release the various chemicals responsible for blood clothing. More of the platelets are getting recruited, and the childbirth will take place. until the clot forms. So that is still an example of a positive question. So homeostasis is very important. It's very necessary. One, it helps to maintain the optimal internal conditions of the body, just from our definition. It again helps you to detect early detection of imbalances, so that now you can have early interventions for the patient, like vital signs. If there's a change in the vital signs of a patient, you know that now those are indicators of homeostatic state of the patient, and they can be able to be indicators of an underlying problem or an impending problem. It also helps to guide clinical interventions. It helps you now to put in place necessary interventions to put in for the patient, managing the various chronic and acute conditions, and even in terms of healing and recovery.